Star Fox 64 is one of, if not the most iconic rail shooter of all time. It had a lot of things that we still see to this day, like popularizing rumble in games, the branching mission structure that would grandfather cinematic games like The Walking Dead and Dispatch, and with how quotable the game got.
Do a barrel roll!
It felt like Star Fox could try a lot of new things after this game, and for a while, they did with the release of Star Fox Adventures, which is a Zelda-like game that has bad dungeons, horrendous voice acting, and awful moments. Fun for the whole family. Then we got Star Fox Assault, which sought to expand the story of the series more, which was somewhat divisive at the time, but has gotten a lot more love recently. But after Star Fox Command on the DS, the series never really did anything new with the franchise. In 2011, we got Star Fox 64 3D, a remake of Star Fox 64 for the 3DS, which was just Star Fox 64 with a few gameplay changes and overhauled look to the game. Then we got Star Fox Zero, which if you've been in the Star Fox community, you know how divisive this game is. People who love it, and people who hate it, which also didn't help that the game was basically a retelling of Star Fox 64, which to me seems like a way to get people to buy the game because it's similar to the most iconic game in the series, but releasing it on a console that had the shelf life of milk didn't really help them all that much. I recommend Norell's video on the game and the failure of the Wii U. Really good video. After Zero, Star Fox took a bit of a dirt nap as the sales for Zero were some of the lowest numbers in the series. Star Fox would make the occasional appearance in other games like Smash Bros, and even had a side campaign like thing in the Switch version of Starlink Battle for Atlas, which I haven't played yet but am somewhat interested in. But something changed earlier this year when on April 1st of 2026 we saw Fox McCloud in the Super Mario Galaxy movie, which was very weird at the time since it felt like he was just there, but then again that was basically the best part of the Mario Galaxy movie. But then a month later in May we got a Star Fox Direct that showed off a new game.
Atmospheric entry complete. Extend the wings. G-diffuser systems check. Sound off, team.
Slippy here. So far, so good.
This is Peppy. All systems go.
Falco here. G-diffuser seems fine. Let's go already.
Enemy targets up ahead. Let's rock and roll!
Oh, this is Star Fox 64 again. Okay. Yeah, needless to say, I did not like the fact that this game was a remake of Star Fox 64, especially when we already got a remake of the game back in 2011 that we could have just ported to the Nintendo Switch, which is basically the same thought process I had with the announcer of the Ocarina of Time remake I mentioned in my I Am Tired of Remakes video. I wasn't going to buy this game, but then my friend Juice from the Juice Box challenged me to beat his high score on Medio, so I ended up buying the game, so that I can wreck his ass. But since I bought this game and made a big stink about remakes, I thought I might as well make a video on it. So here we are. This is what I dub Star Fox 26. The story of the game is very much the same as the original. You play as Fox McCloud, and you're on a team called Star Fox. You are commissioned by General Pepper to take care of Andross, and that's what you do. But the additions to the story are more so from the presentation side of things and a new cutscene. The new cutscene of the game was shown off in the Direct, which plays as soon as you start the game, which is basically what happened to James McCloud on his last mission on Venom with Peppy and Pigma. This cutscene is fine overall, but to me, it kind of feels wrong because of one thing. In the original game, you were just given a text blurb about what happened, so you have to take the game on its word of what happened. So throughout the game, when Peppy tells you something about your father, you feel the loss of him and want to live up to his legacy as a legendary starfighter. But here, just the idea of seeing James McCloud in the game gives the vibe that they want to give us their version of how these events did play out and mess out on all the intrigue of the cutscene, which isn't inherently a bad thing overall, just something I overall didn't like to see and made the intrigue of James McCloud less interesting. Also, this is a random thing I was thinking of when I first saw this cutscene, but when I first saw Pigma, the first thing that came to my mind was that he almost looked like the Seth Rogen pig from the recently released Animal Farm movie. So whenever I see Pigma in the game, I always think of Seth Rogen pig. Anyway, aside from the cutscene, the game's story is pretty much the same as the original. There are some small changes here and there with the cutscenes. The most noticeable one is that the game has full cutscenes between missions. After you complete a mission on a certain planet, you will be greeted to a cutscene of the team interacting with General Pepper and talking about their next plan of attack. In between these cutscenes, you get little bits of character for each of the characters, but I never really thought that these additions were really all that groundbreaking to begin with. Like, yeah, it shows us how much of a team Star Fox really is compared to the original game, where General Pepper would just give us what the next mission that we need to do, but it's an idea and execution that is just neat at best if you ask me. These cutscenes also show us the new voice actors that portray these characters and possibly the future. Now, I want to go on record and say that new voices portraying characters I already like is not a bad thing whatsoever. I am a Sonic fan and a TMNT fan, and there are many interpretations of these characters with different voices. It all comes down to if they are able to get the core idea of the character's identity down into a voice that suits them. With this remake, I feel like it misses the mark to some extent with the characters' voices. Fox is voiced by Hunter McCoy, which is ironically funny coincidence given that McCoy is voicing McCloud. But anyway, this is the only role I know of Hunter McCoy's, and I think he does a fine enough job playing as Fox. The new voice has some of the charisma in the cutscenes, but I feel like he doesn't go the full mile with it as much as some of the previous actors who portrayed Fox.
That's no small ask, General. But as it happens, my team's available to deploy immediately. For a price.
Falco is voiced by Andrew Russell, who has played many characters in many English dubs like Fate, Sakamoto Days, and Detective Conan. Personally, Falco is my least favorite voice of the main four characters. To me, Falco's voice needs to be more like a surfer dude sounding voice, like most of the other voices in the series, so they can play up his personality and attitude.
Having a tough time there?
Huh? Hey, what are you?
Falco's voice in this game doesn't really work well with the personality and attitude he has. It just sounds like some dude who I just met in a new city to me.
Intelligence? You mean secrets. Bet that's where General Pepper keeps his dirty laundry.
Slippy Toad is voiced by Jeremy Adams, who is mainly a writer who works on many Warner Bros. Properties, and he was fine as Slippy, but not my preferred take on the character. In this game, he does sound more like a boy than the other interpretations, so if you wanted Slippy to sound like a boy, this is the voice you want for your game. But I would be lying if I said I didn't prefer the Star Fox Zero and Star Fox 64 interpretation of the character. But like I said, the voice works fine and fits the character well.
Hacking the enemy network now. If we could intercept this train, we'd cut off the flow of weapons from Macbeth.
Peppy here is voiced by Eric Braw, who voices Moon Knight in Marvel Rivals and did the narration for Ori and the Will of the Wisp. And like with Slippy Toad, he does a fine job with the character, but is far from my preferred take on the character. The new voice for the character does make him sound like an old geezer like the character he is, but I feel like they take his western sounding voice to a more extreme than in Star Fox Zero, which is my favorite voice of Peppy's.
Seriously, you guys? The Cornerian army and Andross's forces have been at war for years now, and here you are always joking around.
I think we'd all agree that the new voice is better than the voice they gave Peppy in Star Fox Adventure.
Andross's army could be used in Medio as a staging area for the invasion. But never mind that. You heard General Pepper. The fleet needs our support in Sector Y.
Hey, Fox! Isn't this music getting on your nerves? I'm trying to work on my maps.
But that's not saying much. The voice acting isn't the worst thing in the world, but I do think the other games have better acting in them. Now we get onto the two other parts of the presentation that aren't surrounding the story changes and the voice acting, which are the looks of the game and the soundtrack. Now, like all N64 games out there, Star Fox 64 hasn't aged the best, since it came out in the generation of games that started 3D gaming, which wouldn't be refined till the 6th generation of games. But I feel like there was a charm to games of this generation with the low poly look and how developers tried to make assets work with the bilinear filter that the N64 uses. Now, as we are in the current generation of consoles of 2026, the game is very much going to have a higher fidelity in terms of the pixels, polygons, and colors. Now, the biggest thing surrounding these games' presentation when it came out and is still being discussed about nearly a month later is the character designs for the Star Fox team. And needless to say, like most people, I was not a big fan of how they looked when I first saw them. But now that I have played the game for a few hours and doing pretty much everything, I have gotten used to most of the designs of the characters. It is clear to clarify that the original character designer for Star Fox, Takuya Imamura, has cited the new designs as what he envisioned when he was designing for Star Fox 64. Fox overall looks fine to me, and he does look like an anthropomorphic fox. Slippy looked weird to me at first, but similar to Fox, I do think he looks fine and that he does look like an anthropomorphic frog. Peppy basically looks like the same as he has in the previous games, except for the look he had in Star Fox Adventure. But most things look better than Peppy in Star Fox Adventures. That is 2 times I did a diss on Peppy in Star Fox Adventures. His ears curl a bit more in this game, but it's whatever. Falco, however, is a design that I am not the biggest fan of. He looks a little unorthodox compared to his other designs in the series, and I have never liked the fact that he has real bird feet in this game, as it looks off-putting compared to the other characters, especially in the final cutscene of the game. I already mentioned that Pigma looks like Seth Rogen Pig from Animal Farm 2026, but all of the other characters I don't have much of a strong reaction to. In terms of the actual look of the game and the levels, the game definitely looks very good. Since we are no longer shackled to the N64, the designers can put in more detail to the geometry of the levels and obstacles. I am typically someone who doesn't go out of their way to see how pretty a game is, so basically I am not a graphics nut like most people, but even just from the first playthrough, I noticed a change up from the game visually, like adding rain on Corneria and the realistic lighting of the water in Aquas. There are some changes to the levels I am personally not a big fan of. I am not into the green hue they added to Meteos, as it makes the level look as though it takes place in an atmosphere of a planet instead of a meteor field that is in space, like how it was in the original game. The sky drop for Solar is much worse in my opinion than the original, as while it is more realistic to have a skybox of space for the literal sun in the game, I feel like the more reddish orange skybox of the original just made the atmosphere of the level more intense, as you are on what could possibly be your final mission of the game. And while I do like the more realistic mechanical background of Andross's lair in this game, part of me still prefers the more fucky-wucky earthbound looking background of the original game, especially when Andross is at his final phase in the game. The final presentation thing I want to talk about in this game is the music. Star Fox 64 has one of the most iconic soundtracks on the N64, and so the idea of remaking the soundtrack is one that appeals to me honestly, because I think that some games could go with a more auditorial facelift than others, and I think that almost all of the songs in the remake are pretty good. My favorite songs from the remake are the same as my favorite songs in the original, so I don't have much to say on that. The only thing I really have to say is that the biggest change to the soundtrack is the music that plays during the final dash out of Andross's lair. In the original game, the song that plays is the boss theme of the game, which makes the escape from Andross's lair feel a lot more frantic with you needing to get out of there as fast as possible. It may be reusing a track, but it works for the moment. The remake added a new song for this section of the game, which is a very somber sounding choir track, while none of the sounds around Fox's surrounding are making audible noises to the player. Now, personally, I do not like this change at all, as it kind of messes with the tone of the moment. In the remake, it feels like we're supposed to be focused on Fox seeing his father, which shouldn't feel like a somber moment for the character. The best way to convey this is this clip I made, where the final moments of Star Wars A New Hope just plays music that isn't bombastic or fast-paced.
Luke, trust me. His computer's off.
There is one change I like in the story, which was the ending, because he added more bits of character to Star Fox with how they interact with each other and their interactions with General Pepper. And Slippy's line here is really funny to me.
Is that Bill? Hi, Bill!
But yeah, other than that, I have almost nothing to say regarding the presentation of the game. There are some changes I like to it, and some changes that I think make it a lesser product in my eyes. But I cannot say that they did drive this game and how it was presented. But now that we talked about all the presentation of the game, let's now get into the game feel of the game and the mouse controls. Star Fox 64 is one of the few N64 games that I think has aged better than most of its contemporaries when it comes to controls. I wouldn't say it's perfect, as like most N64 games, the sensitivity on sticks is not the best when being ported to newer hardware, but aside from that, the game still has a satisfying game feel with its punchy sound effects and variety of moves. The first thing I need to mention about the remake is that the game runs at a solid 60 FPS throughout the game, compared compared to the original game that runs at 30 FPS with some frame drops here and there. I thought that Venom 2 ran at 30 FPS when recording it, but that might have been the playback on my capture card on OBS, so no frame rate problems with this game. The structure of the game is the same as the original. You start on the planet of Corneria to deal with the enemy threat, and are then sent out to defeat Andros. You have many branching paths ahead of you that will all lead to the same endpoint of Venom. Just playing it normally, you can reach Venom, but if you are willing to put in the work, you can travel to other planets to reach Venom and get the jump on Andros. Now, I don't have a lot to say about the levels in this game, as they are basically the same as the original, so if you don't like Aquas as a level, then there's nothing much for you there. But the feel of this remake is worth talking about. There are two ways to play the remake in this game: the regular control mode, or by using the mouse controls that come with the Switch 2. For most of the game, I played with the controller option, but I did do a run with the mouse controls. On a regular controller, it is what you expect if you have played any Star Fox game. You control both the ship and reticle for the blaster on the ship using the control stick. You fire the blaster with the A button, you fire your bombs with the Y button, and you boost with the X button and brake with the B button. One of the core changes made to the remake's controls that I actually quite like is that you have a button for performing the somersault and the U-turn. While the N64 controller had plenty of buttons, the way it was designed made it so that you didn't have easy access to all of the buttons given to you, which Nintendo would have fixed to the release of the GameCube, which used a more conventional design format for its controller. So when you played N64 games, most of the time you had your left hand on the bottom of the controller and use your right hand where most of the face buttons are. So to combat this in Star Fox 64, you have to use both the control stick and the C buttons to perform the somersault and the U-turn. In the remake, they just gave the somersault and U-turn their own button mappings on the D-pad, which is a good quality of life change. Now I will say that until my most recent run of the game for the video, I didn't know that I could perform the U-turn by pressing the bottom button on the D-pad, though maybe that was in the practice mode and I just forgot. The feel of the R-Wing feels just right in this game, as it felt very responsive to use and never had a problem with the steering overall. But I will say that I did notice something with the homing shot. Sometimes I would need to press the fire button multiple times when trying to launch the homing shot. When I wouldn't do that, the homing shot just wouldn't fire and made me run into the enemy most of the time, which became really annoying to me. The Landmaster is overall the same in terms of how I feel about the controls, and it is very responsive and never really had a major problem with it overall. But now we get into the fun part of the controls, which are the mouse controls that were added into this game. One of the defining new features of the Joy-Con 2 are the new mouse controls, which allow you to use them like a mouse. Some games have mouse controls implemented into them, like Metroid Prime 4 for aiming Samus's blaster, and Plants vs. Zombies Replanted for placing your plants down faster than on a controller. But this is the first Switch 2 game I used mouse controls for, since I thought it would be interesting to document my thoughts of them for this game and how I feel about them overall. All you need to do to use mouse controls in this game is to just put on the Switch 2 wrist strap and place the Joy-Con 2 on its side, and then you are using it like a mouse. While in mouse control, you are stuck in a first-person mode for the game, similar to some sections in the original Star Fox, but the most comparable game is Star Fox Zero and how the gamepad was implemented, just without the gamepad and force motion controls. You mainly control the reticle of the blaster of the R-Wing, which also dictate which direction that you are flying towards. So if you are pointing the reticle towards the left, the R-Wing is going to steer left. Overall, found this to be fine overall, but it is definitely a learning curve when you first try it out. But the most annoying part about this is when you are leaning to the left or right, because when you lean, you need to move the reticle immediately to the top of the R-Wing in your POV, so that you can move further to the left and or right, and not move left and or right as well as up or down, which makes the movement of the mouse controls very haphazard, especially in all range mode, when you are trying to be precise in shooting down enemies or a certain target. The left Joy-Con is mainly used for doing the actions that are tied to the D-pad like the regular controller, but I will say that if you are prone to motion sickness, I would not recommend mouse controls for this game, as it doesn't switch to an outside view when doing them, it still does them in the POV camera position, so be warned of that. Most of my problems with the mouse controls in this game came from the actions that were tied to your right Joy-Con that you are most likely going to use as your mouse. Now, shooting with the mouse controls is fine, as it is just the R and ZR button. It takes a while to get used to boosting and braking with the control stick, but not impossible, as I was able to get used to it pretty quickly. But for a while, I did not know how to use bombs with the mouse controls, as the game doesn't really tell you unless you go to the pause menu and check it out, and the buttons to press to use the bombs is the face buttons on the right Joy-Con, which feels uncomfortable in the moment since they require you to clench your shooter fingers to reach them. But to be honest, with the better aiming that comes with the mouse controls, you are not going to be using bombs all that much. Basically, mouse controls are the most accurate when it comes to destroying enemies, to the point that I was getting gold medals on some of the levels for my mouse controls runs on the video, but it comes at the cost of R-Wing control, which can be uncomfortable and cumbersome to use. This is also just a personal preference thing, but I am not a fan of how the mouse controls feel on my hands after the second level of the game. While as controllers they work well for my big ass hands, the form factor of them on their side is still a little too small for my liking. It makes clenching watching them feel very uncomfortable after a while. Maybe I should use some third-party accessories for using mouse controls for other games. I hear that the Mamba mouse grips are good, so I might get those. But it depends on if mouse controls will still be implemented in future Nintendo games. But at the moment, not a fan of the feel of the mouse controls. But they work fine enough for Star Fox 26. But I would rather use the regular control scheme, as it is the all-around best control scheme for the game. Though you could do a mix of both, as going from controller to mouse scheme in the game is instant. So there's that. Finally, we have to talk about the two new modes that were added to this remake. The first new addition is Challenge Mode. In this mode, you pick a level you want to play and you are given challenges, which can range from defeating a certain number of enemies, doing certain things in the game, or doing something within the time limit. You are given 6 challenges to do in normal mode, and then you are given 6 more challenges on extreme mode once you do all of the challenges in normal mode. I think this is a neat new addition to the game, as it gives the game a lot more replay value than it already has with the branching path system in the campaign of the game. It also allows you to see all that is possible within the levels of the game with the challenges that you are given. To access them, all you really need to do is reach the level in the campaign, and then you will just go straight to the challenges in the challenge mode. It also works well as a level select if you want to test out a level and try to get better at it before replaying the campaign to get the medal or the path that you want to go down. While I wouldn't say that this addition is worthwhile or changes my opinion of the game, I don't mind it being here and think it will be helpful for new players who want to get better at the game, or for old players who want to get more replay value out of the game. The last new addition is the new Battle Mode, which is the online multiplayer game mode added to the game. But when I tried to get an online match set up so that I can get footage, no one was online. So I decided to play one multiplayer map with the bots to see if this would be for me, as I never really thought single player games need multiplayer added to them nowadays, as we live in an era of gaming where you could sell a game as a multiplayer experience or as a single player experience. But I am down to try this mode out and see if it would make it worth picking up the game every now and again with friends, and needless to say, I felt that. But it wasn't really that big of a deal to me, or how some of my friends described it. The mode I played was the capture an area mode, where you and 3 other players battle against 4 players on the opposing team to try and capture an area, and in a moment I was having some fun as I was playing as Peppy Hare and was shooting down the enemies. But honestly, after that, my attention wasn't held for that much longer, so after one map I felt like I got enough out of the playing with bots. This isn't really a critical review on the battle mode, as I only played one round, but I am down to try more with friends, as most of these games modes are better with friends. Maybe that could be a cool stream idea. We'll never know. I feel like that should cover basically all that I have to say about this game. It is definitely the remake of all time to me. It is Star Fox 64 at its core, which is a fun game, but like I said in my remake video, I prefer remakes that tend to change things in terms of how it's designed. The addition of cutscenes does seem cool, but they don't really do a whole lot in the grand scheme of the game. The addition of changes surrounding James McCloud I will never like, as it basically ruined the intrigue of him as a figure for Fox. The game plays beautifully and looks really good and has some neat additional modes, but at the end of the day, this is just a prettier version of Star Fox 64. If you have the original game, I feel like you wouldn't really be missing out on this version of the game whatsoever. Part of me understands the existence of this remake, as it is made to get kids into the world of Star Fox, and so remaking the game that basically defined Star Fox back then, and how the character was introduced into the Super Mario Galaxy movie, it makes sense. I am just so tired of seeing this game be remade, retold, and reimagined so many times now. Like, it is funny to talk about all the versions of Star Fox 64, but when does it get to a point where it's just not even funny anymore, and just downright sad that we keep on getting this game over and over again? This game was not made for me, and that is fine. If you like this game, good for you. If you want to get this game, more power to you. But for me, there are other ways I could feel satisfied with Star Fox or games like it. I can play Star Fox 64 with the fan-made PC port that adds a lot to the game. I could play many games that were inspired by Star Fox like Exodiac, and I can even play other rail shooters out there like Panzer Dragoon. If you could take anything away from this video, go out there and try new things, because your next favorite game might just be around the corner.